Hey everybody, Brett here with Conversational Pace, and I want to welcome everyone to a special episode of Chatting Shoes. Before we dive into this incredible episode with Rajpaul Pannu, I have two important announcements. One, I have restocked all sizes and then some for all Conversational Pace merch. I will link below in the show notes if you want to grab a sweatshirt or a t-shirt or crew neck. And there might even be some hats on the way. Stay tuned for that. Second announcement, I am launching the Conversational Pace Patreon channel. If you become a Patreon member, any amount that you sign up for gets you full access to all of the perks of being a Patreon member. The only reason that there's for different tiers is I just want everyone to be able to contribute what they feel is a fair amount to the channel, but everyone will still get full access to all the subscriber perks, including but not limited to bonus reviews, additional chat about shoes that maybe didn't make the cut or are not going to be taken to the full 100-mile review. I want to do quick running nutrition reviews because another piece of the sport that I'm very passionate about is the running nutrition and finding those perfect gels and drink mixes. So I'm always trying out different things, and I want to share what's in my running pantry this week. I will also be including audio only versions of all the content that I publish to YouTube. So that way, if you do not have the time to sit down and watch one of these interviews or shoe review, you can at least listen to it. You will also get discounts to Conversational Pace merch, as well as first access to some future merch drops. I'll have a link below. You'll be able to see all the perks. Go check it out. See if you think it's worth your while. Without further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Rajpaul Pannu. All right, welcome to Chatting Shoes, presented by Conversational Pace. I've got Raj here with me today, hot off a very, very fast 100-mile race. Let's see, what's it? It's been a week,
It's
just
been a
over
week
a
and some
week.
change. Yeah. Uh,
How's the body? How's the mind?
um, Believe it or not, apparently some controversy had happened,
No
after the
way.
race, but um, my body, I've recovered fairly quickly, and I didn't do any running, no strength training, no mobility stuff. Last week or this past week was naturally incredibly stressful. Um, you know, Not only do you run 100 miles, you run the 100 miles and then you get disqualified, and then you run the 100 miles, get disqualified, and then you see what's written online, this and that, and you're like, Jesus, like, to be transparent, I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm like, am I going to get dropped as a result of this, by my shoe sponsor? Or what other ramifications, like, am I going to get like canceled per se, like in the running community? um so all these things were like on my mind during that time. But Hoka's been incredibly supportive. They're like, man, sorry that happened. Like, it was a really crappy situation, not only for you, but, you know, obviously, just to be upfront, like USATF could have done better, right? But
Mm.
I'm holding myself accountable. And this was just a learning lesson. Like, this was just a road bump. I just turned 34 this past weekend, and I plan on retiring when I'm 41. So I still have a lot of running left to do, and I'm gonna finish my story. So this is just a part of the story, and hopefully 20 years from now I could just freaking laugh at it. You
This
know,
will just be a blip.
yeah, it's not funny right now, but 20 years, give it 20 years, and hopefully I can laugh about it.
Um, why 41?
Um, so you're a master's athlete when you're 40, and I feel like
Yeah.
I just need like an extra year after that.
Okay.
Um, I love running. I love pushing my body, my limits, but I would say ultra running is not the healthiest sport for a man to do. Like, nothing about running 130-mile weeks is healthy. Like, yeah, I find fulfillment in the work that I do, but it's like I'm also like deprived of like testosterone, and it's like I have to like eat healthy, sleep healthy, be on top of like my like supplements, right? Like all these things
Hmm.
just to get this body running and running 130 miles.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the the professional athlete lifestyle across. It seems like so many of the sports. It's like, yeah, I really enjoy what I'm doing, but I can't wait for when I get to do this casually.
Yeah. Yeah, so you know what my plan is after I retire?
What's that?
I'm going to start a podcast and talk about shoes and do shoe reviews.
Dude,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
So
that's a great
we'll
idea.
my goal is to be your biggest competitor, and we just met. So
Hell yeah, I like that. What do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. So
yeah, exactly.
I welcome you to the shoe podcasting sphere. I wonder if I'll still be doing this in 8 years. So
I
will we even
mean,
have internet in 8 years? I don't even know.
apparently shoe technology has improved quite a bit in the evolution of shoe technology as I'm learning the past 5 years. So one can only imagine what happens 8 years from now, right?
Yeah, shoes could they could potentially ruin the entire sport in 8 years at the rate things are going.
Well, one of the rules ruined it for me over a week ago, but hopefully I'm just an
Yeah,
anomaly.
yeah, I hope so. And it's definitely something when you'd reached out because you had been watching the episode with Jamil
Hmm.
and Skylar, and one of the biggest points that we had talked about was the stack height rules that World Athletics and USATF have implemented, and how it really only gets talked about like on the marathon side of the world and shorter,
Hmm.
but then there is quite a few events longer than a marathon where these rules apply, but I feel like I've never even heard it get mentioned once, above the marathon distance. And if that's
Yeah.
you know, the the side of the running world that you live in, I can see. I mean, it totally makes sense why something like this could happen, which is unfortunate that it did, and
Hmm.
I imagine it'll never happen again. But it
Yeah.
would be awesome to talk about kind of the timeline leading into things,
Hmm.
because as being like the resident shoe nerd over here, like I know just watching you race a lot, the
Hmm.
Rocket X2 had been your shoe for the last handful of races, even including I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you were Rocket X2 at Javelina this last year too, right?
Yeah. Do you mind if I backtrack real quick
Yeah,
as to
absolutely.
why I reached out to you specifically?
Sure.
Um, so I told you off record that I saw Jamil post that he was going to be on an episode with you in regards to shoes and the policy of shoes, this and that. And I was playing your podcast in the background as I was cleaning. And 10 minutes in, I stopped. I'm like, wait a minute. Your target demographic audience, like I'm assuming, are a bunch of shoe nerds. And
More or
I'm the
less, yeah.
exact, more or less, but I'm the exact, or leading up to the race, like I'm the exact opposite. Like I've never been a shoe nerd, and I felt like just talking about my experience in regards to shoes and my approach leading up to this race might offer like a different perspective, because you would imagine a professional runner sponsored by a shoe company to be dialed in every which way possible, be it training, be it nutrition, sleep, et cetera, and shoes, right? And I've been all those things. However, when it came to shoes, I'm like, you know what? I trust Hoka. They make dope shoes. Whatever shoes I wear, like I'm a ball out in them, you know? Um, but
Oh, damn, I do kind of
it,
love that too.
and I can talk about that philosophy uh, and that approach initially. But yeah, I'll talk about the timeline of the Skyward X, or leading up to my decision to go with the Skyward X.
Mm.
Um, so 2 weeks prior to the race, I did my longest training run. It was a 50K run around a park, and I was going at a 100-mile pace wearing the Rocket X2s. So I was averaging 6:45 or so, which is the 100-mile American record, or would have been the 100-mile American record. And three and a quarter or 3 hours, a little bit after 3 hours into the run, I developed some numbness in my toes
Hmm.
wearing the Rocket X2. And then I also, when I had finished, I realized that I developed a blister. Now, looking back, I recall racing. I ran Javelina in the Rocket X2s. And sometime between miles 65 to 70, there was like a brief moment where my foot was numb.
Hmm.
And I've already ordered half a size up. So after that training run, and I finished that training run, I went home and I was looking up Hoka's catalog for like what shoes that I want to run in. And I also, although I don't have much of a background knowledge in regards to shoes, I definitely like do my research in regards to like athletes who've done really well in 100-mile races. And I recall Camille talking to Dylan on Run Free Trail after she had broken her previous 100-mile record. Uh, I'm not sure if she spoke about which type of shoes, but she spoke about how carbon plated shoes weren't the most comfortable for her for a 12 plus hour race. Uh, so she went with like the ring cones, which
Yeah.
are basic trainers. Um, so I had that in mind, and I'm like, wait a minute, I need to run 6:45 pace. I can do 6:45 pace in some Hoka slides, like if I wanted to, right? So my
Yeah.
thought process was just like, maybe I don't need a performance shoe. Maybe I just need a shoe built for comfort. So I ordered the Bondi 9 and the Mach X2. Now,
Mm.
knowing what I know now about stack height, I can tell you that those two shoes are unsanctioned as well.
Yes. You were really setting yourself up for something.
But anyhow, after January 31st, I ordered the pair. I had gotten the shoes a week prior to my race. And on back to back days, I tested the Bondi 9s and the Mach X2s, and I ran an hour at 100-mile American record pace. So I try them on, I wear them, and both were good. However, I was worried that the Mach X2 might have been a little bit more aggressive, whereas the Bondi
Mm.
9 might not have been aggressive enough.
Yeah.
So a week prior, I reach out to one of Hoka's product line managers. Now, it's important to note this person is not required to know USATF rules, right? But he definitely knows everything about shoes, everything and anything about shoes. So I'm asking him, I'm like, yo, what shoes should I wear? Should I wear the Bondi 9, the Mach X2? I'm definitely bringing both of them along with the Rocket X2. And then he was like, yo, you should try the Skyward X. And then I pause because I had received a free pair of Skyward X's the year prior. And I remember
Mm.
pulling the shoe out and looking at it. And I'm like, I'm never going to race in these shoes. These shoes are too heavy. And they don't look anything like the Arahis or the Gaviotas. Those are like the staple shoes that I wear because apparently I pronate.
Mm.
And you can fact check me. Are those shoes good for pronation?
Those are the two in the Hoka catalog
Okay.
that are like
Whew.
specifically designed
Okay.
for a little extra medial
All right.
support. They've got
Uh,
that J-frame technology.
I'm naturally a bit self-conscious because like I'm a guy coming into your space not knowing much about shoes, and I'm like, man, do I if I mess up something, like am I gonna get rocks thrown at me, But yeah, so those are two shoes designed for uh just to supplement pronation, right? Um and I didn't imagine ever racing in the Skyward X's. I saw this shoe, it was heavy. And I didn't think much of it. So I brought the shoes to my mom's house in the Bay Area. I live in Denver. Uh, so I do have several pairs of shoes that I keep just like in case of an emergency. And I had never worn the Skyward X's before. Um, However, he was like, you should strongly consider wearing those shoes because although they're not a super shoe, they're a super trainer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what I had thought of when he had said that, I'm like, maybe this is the perfect medium between the Bondi 9 and the Mach X2.
I mean, on paper, it really is. It is kind of the love child between the two shoes, because you got that like super foam, but like Bondi stack height.
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm a bit conflicted because I'm like, man, shouldn't I break these shoes in? And I think a generic Google response was like, yeah, you should spend 40 to 50 miles breaking into a shoe before like doing serious workouts, or just taking some time to really break into the shoes. So I'd gotten my pair a few days prior to the race. So the race happened on Valentine's Day. And on Wednesday, 2 days prior, I take the shoes out of the box and I put them on. And this was a travel day. I also had to work that day. So I spent the entire day on my feet teaching. And then after that, I took an Uber to the airport, walked around, grabbed luggage, got my rental, went to the Airbnb, et cetera, et cetera. So that was day one of breaking into the Skyward X's. The second day, and I still wasn't sure. I'm like, okay, am I going to go with the Bondis, the Mocs, or the Skyward X's? And I also had the Rocket X2s. The day prior, I was going to do a course preview. I mean, I had ran this course 85 times, but I was just going to run one lap just to like give myself some reassurance as to how I'm going to run
Totally.
American record pace. So I try on the Skyward X's and I'm like, all right, screw it. Let's go for a run. I run 1 mile in the shoes. I'm like, okay, I don't know much about the shoes. I'm going to do 2 strides. So I do 2 strides. And typically when I do strides, I average anywhere between like 415 to 450 pace, right? Uh, when I did the strides, I ran like 420 ish for 25 plus seconds. And I'm like, you know what? Let's go with the Skyward X's.
Wow. So you logged a solid 1.5 miles in them.
Yeah, prior to race day. And then I ran 101 miles more.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. But
That
I,
that makes me sweat just thinking about that.
so let me ask your thoughts. Would you do something like that? Like knowing what you know about shoes?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can totally see that whole like shoe timeline like playing out, because it's like you've raced in the Rocket X2 a whole bunch. It's like worked, but then there's like some little problems at your last race. You do a big training run, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
this didn't work that well. Okay, I got to find something else. And then you're kind of just on this like semi panicked time crunch of like, oh no, what shoes do I wear? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, in your case, you only have Hokas to choose from, whereas like
Mm-hmm.
me, before any race, it's a absolute nightmare trying to pick like what shoe I'm gonna wear, because it's like, should I just wear whatever I'm testing, or should I wear the one that I think is best
Uh-huh.
for the course? Or so I totally understand the rationale behind, like, at some point you're just like, screw it, like I've just got to try this one and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Um,
So, and
and
I apologize.
yeah, I mean, shoes
You,
have gotten pretty good too.
yeah, you're telling me you would freak out trying to decide what pair of shoes you want to run in the night prior to the race. Is that right? Given that you have so many different pairs to choose from?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where like the last few races, I will only bring like one pair with me when I travel, just to
Okay.
make it
Yeah.
so I don't like screw things up. Like, I think like I did the Black Canyon 50K a couple weeks ago, and I was like, there's 6 different shoes that I should be racing in just for testing
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, and it's like, no, I'm just gonna pick one, and I'm going to fully commit by only bringing that one pair of shoes. So
Hmm.
then I can't last minute change. And I did that for the previous race as well. And I think that's just like what I have to do moving forward, because I'm not responsible enough to bring 6 different pairs. I would have switched shoes like after 30 or 40 miles probably,
Hmm.
like just out
And
of curiosity or anything.
yeah, yeah. And what I would add is that like that's incredibly stressful. That compounds like leading up to the race itself. Like if you're stressing about what shoes to wear, like that kind of eats a little bit into your energy going into a big effort, right?
For
Like
sure,
race
yeah.
day, yeah, race day is stressful enough as it is. The night prior is stressful enough. People freak out about gear, and you like make sure that you have all of your gels and your crew is dialed in. All these things, it's incredibly stressful, and I feel like adding on to or just like thinking about shoes on top of it just is just something else to like I mean, it might be like a little bit too extra, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's also just that's like the direction I've seen this sport going as
Yeah.
well, especially since like 2020 when super shoes really hit the scene. It's like the Nike Vaporfly, where it then became like a piece of equipment where if you're not wearing the right thing, you're leaving time on the table.
Mm, yeah.
Like we've seen that in the cycling world for so many years, and that's why there's 8 bazillion rules around bicycles and even how high your socks can be in like a professional cycling race. It's like
Yeah.
is running going that way? Um, Probably never to that extent, but
Hmm.
I mean, we have like legit rules for shoes for the first time ever, and the
Yeah.
rules, they're only 3 years old or 4 years old.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you know who Jim Thorpe is?
why do the name sounds Thorpe sounds
Oh
familiar?
man, I am gonna school you on some shoes now. I'm gonna flip the script here, okay?
Sweet, let's have it.
So Jim Thorpe was this he was like the all-American athlete in the early 20th century. He played football, and I believe he did multiple events for track and field. Um, anyhow, during the I want to say it was the early 1900s. I'm just going to save myself by saying early 1900s. He had lost his pair of shoes prior to an Olympic event, so he needed a pair of shoes to wear. He randomly found a pair of shoes in a garbage bin, and then he ended up winning 2 gold medals wearing those shoes. So it's so crazy how like 100 years later we're like so like the evolution of shoes, not only just the evolution of shoes, but just the intricacies of shoes. Whereas like Jim Thorpe just he did not think much of it. However, we also must acknowledge that training, technology, competition is so much more advanced now. Like
Oh yeah,
I would assume Noah Lyles can't pull off something like that. Maybe he could, but like that would be
he's pretty
far
good.
more. Yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good, but I
Yeah,
would say this, like I had more of a Thorpe approach, and that's like kind of like my shoe philosophy versus like how dialed in people have been. I mean, leading up to Valentine's Day, I'm obviously one not going to make the same mistake, but I'm also just I'm naturally curious about shoes because it's kind of a part of my running identity, even though I didn't ask for it to be a part of my running identity. That makes sense.
it's been forced upon you now.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is interesting how yeah, it really just you would wear what either was the lightest or wouldn't give you blisters. Like those were pretty much it
Hmm.
for shoes. And now there's like what you were saying, like you were like I was choosing between the Bondi, the Mach X and the Skyward X, and turns out all of them are not World Athletics approved stack heights. Like when did this happen? And honestly, I feel like it's been almost an overnight sort of thing where it, every single shoe company is now building a lot of shoes that are over that 40 millimeter limit, where
Hmm.
it was like Adidas like had one, Nike had none, like Hoka had really high stack shoes, but they actually weren't that high stack compared to now because everyone else was just really low stack. So it's
Hmm.
like it's changed so fast. And then when and the other thing too, like the ultra marathon side of the world, like it doesn't keep up with the pace of like track or marathon in terms of like where a lot of the training science and footwear tech is. There's kind of that trickle down from like the most popular events, like the 100. Like the 100 probably gets the
Hmm.
most money in terms of research and development for training and exercise science, and then it kind of trickles down. Um, and then like here we are
These are
trying to,
things that I'm learning,
yeah,
like on the fly as a result.
yeah, and yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned like it it was never anything that was like needed to be learned, you know,
Hmm.
in a way as well. When so you've been sponsored by Hoka since 20, was it 21?
Officially 2021. I am still a part of the Hoka Aggies. They're a
Oh,
regional
sweet.
team based out in Southern California, and they've had national champions and they've had an Olympian. Like they're a
Is
pretty
that Joe
solid group.
Rubio's team?
That is Joe Rubio's team. Yeah.
Dude, shouts to Joe.
Shout out to Joe Rubio, and apparently he knows a thing or two about shoes.
Joe does know quite a few things about
Yeah.
shoes. Side note, my wife's uncle was roommates with Joe in college.
Oh my gosh. There's stories that they have not told, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Joe's a great guy. He went, so there was a point, I had graduated in 2014. I stopped running. I was a really good cross country and track athlete, but being really good doesn't mean that you're going to be a professional athlete after college, right?
True.
Uh,
Yeah.
I had stopped running due to injuries and just burnout and just life, like, and didn't run for 3 or so years. But then I finally picked it back up, and then Joe, actually Scott Boz saw me at a cross
Mm.
country meet, and he's like, "Yo, you should join the Hoka Aggies." And then he connected me to Joe, and then Joe. Uh, During that time, they were the Asics Aggies, but they were transitioning into Hoka. And Joe
Mm.
has a relationship with like Mike McManus, and who's a huge part of Hoka himself. So,
Yep.
but no, definitely shout out to Joe because there was a time when I was substitute teaching and driving Uber just to like make ends meet. So, having the support from the Aggies did help me a little bit, but that little bit went a long ways, during that time.
Yeah. That's super cool. How did how did you transition from like running with the Aggies to ultra marathons? I don't know if I've heard of many people going from like a pro group after college kind of immediately into I think it was the Carbon X2 project. That was your
Mhm.
debut for the 100K.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, um, I've spoken about this before just through like an Instagram post, but I my left leg like from time to time just gives out when I do anything like super fast. It's like if I'm running a
Yeah.
5K or a 10K, or if I'm doing like an 8 mile tempo at 5 minute pace, for some
Uh-huh.
reason, my left, be it sometimes, and I'm just looking at my foot right now, it would be like my ankle that would lock up. And then it would just cause this like trickle up effect to where my
Hmm.
calf seizes and it's almost like running on a peg leg.
Yeah.
And I was able to still run like 2:16 for the marathon and run the trials. However, during that time, uh, I actually wanted to take a step back from the sport because it just took up so much of my time, and I was 29. Um, and I wanted to explore other things in my life. And then COVID hit. So going from like wanting to explore other avenues in life to like being sheltered in place, this and that, I had to explore my relationship with running and think about it like from more of like a 3D perspective. Like and it
Yeah.
made me think about like trails and ultra running, and it also made me think about like what happens if I just run slower but longer? Would that help mitigate whatever issue I have with my leg? So I still have this issue to this day, and I'm trying to do everything that I can to solve this issue. However, it's not as apparent running these longer but slower races versus like doing something like a 10K or even a marathon.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
So, I know we're diverging a little bit away from shoes, but this is super interesting. And I like talking about this sort of thing too. So for a lot of your training, like, have you moved away quite a bit from like the shorter and faster, like intense side of your training?
In a perfect world, I would love to run uh, a marathon again.
Yeah.
However, I think as the sport is evolving, we're coming to find out that although you need volume, although you need elevation, you still need a running economy. And in order to have a very solid running economy, you need to do faster stuff. So like I still do mile repeats, I still do 800s.
Hmm.
However, um, I would do intervals versus like doing like a tempo or a threshold type run because at least if I were to do mile reps, like 8 by 1 mile reps, I still have rest in between and it allows my left leg to reset a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So from a training standpoint, you're still able to check like most of the boxes. It's just the shorter races that the leg gets bugged during.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my transition into ultra marathoning.
Yeah, and then I mean, that first 100K, at least from like a fan's point of view, it looked like it went pretty well, and it seems like that would definitely spark some curiosities in regards to like going faster for that distance or going faster for farther distance. And it seems like you've been on
Yeah.
quite the pursuit the last few years.
What I will tell you is this, and I'm not sure if other pro ultra runners openly admit it. I mean, I mean, I feel like a lot of us do it, but although I never explored the intricacies of shoes, I'm a complete nerd when it comes to training. So it's like when I was training for Carbon X2, I dissected Jim's Strava. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was looking to see what he was doing because Jim was and is the man. And I even told John Ray, I'm like, dude, I am dissecting your Strava because you ran Javelina course record. Like I would be an idiot not to look at your Strava and see what you did leading up to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point though, it's like you got to pick and choose what you want to spend your brain space on.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I would, as coming from someone with like a shoe channel, like I think there's still more gains to be had in the training side of things than just the shoes.
absolutely, absolutely. Tell your viewers not to nerd too much about shoes
Still go running. Buy the shoes
and
and then
still go
run in
running.
them. Yeah. Yeah, that part's definitely important. And it is nice to, I mean, I definitely go through moments of this too where I'm like, it would be really nice to just have my set of like three different trainers that I just run in, and then I
Hmm.
just focus on running and training because, yeah, it's exhausting, like geeking out about shoes all the time, and like that's from someone who I've been like I mean I got my first job at a Fleet Feet when I was 15 years old, living
Uh-huh.
like in like slanging shoes to people before I could drive a car.
I, I went to, I had brunch with a friend and it was, her birthday was the day after mine and she knew what had happened, but she's not like a super avid runner. And then she started to break down just the nuances of stack height, this and that. And I paused and I'm like, how the hell do you know more about shoes than I do? And she was like, oh, I used to work at a running shoe store around like when she was a teenager.
Oh wow, huh?
Yeah, so I can only imagine how much you learn about shoes being in that type of environment.
Oh yeah, I mean it's nonstop. It's just your job.
Yeah.
So
Can I give you my can I give you my initial philosophy on shoes?
yeah, I would love to hear that. That's what I was just
Okay.
gonna ask about.
Okay, cool, cool. Because I feel like this initial philosophy that I had is tied down to everything that had led to me getting disqualified. And I was very candid and I felt like I took a gamble because, and I told you about this, like when I reached out to you, like I feel like your viewers and just the running community in general, they can sense inauthenticity, right? Be it if you're promoting a shoe or if you're under some type of controversy and you're trying to like beat around the bush. And I really had to reflect, and I had plenty of time to reflect uh, as to how I did not know about my shoes. And you spoke about the evolution the past 4 years. And I feel like you're trying to cover my ass a little bit by saying, like, yeah, it's only been 4 years. Like, like give yourself a break. But I had to be very candid and truthful when I said that I just did not care. Like, but that's more of just like a mentality. It doesn't mean that I don't care about uh, that I totally don't care about my shoes. It's more so just like, how do I approach running um, without really exploring certain things like shoe technology and not letting shoe technology or lack of like be the reason as to why I'm not doing well, right? Because from what
Hmm.
I recall, Nike was the first shoe company that had these like super shoes that were like that gave you a boost, but other shoe companies did not, and a lot of athletes fled because of that, right? I do empathize for the athletes that did track events because like if you're doing 800 meters and you need that half second goes a long ways, right? So I empathize with those people, but um, my philosophy on shoes stems from, or my carefree or careless approach stems from how I was raised, and um, I'm an only child to a single parent. So when my dad had passed away when I was 3, and then 2 years later, my mom and I moved from Southern California to the Bay Area. And during that time, she was working a middle-aged job. So from 1996 to 2001, she was working at Jack in the Box. And rent was $700 during that time, at least in 96, which was a lot in the Bay Area. As you know, you're from the Bay Area.
Hmm.
So there was an inherent understanding that I did not burden my mom or I did not trouble my mom about certain things. And shoes was one of those things. Like whatever pairs she would buy, I would wear. And we would go to Payless, Ross, and Mervyn's. Those were like the three stores that she would get shoes from me. And I was totally fine with it. And as a kid, like I didn't think much of it. Kids, like at least in elementary school, like nobody was gonna roast your shoes. Um, However, it wasn't until high school when I saw kids wear like the Nike Air Force Ones and uh, K Swiss, like Dunks, this and that. These were like shoes that were over $100, and I still had to like save face because like I don't want to get bullied over a pair of shoes or get roasted over a pair of shoes. And I noticed the Converse All Star, like the classic Chucks.
Hmm.
And I noticed that, punk rockers were wearing it, skaters were wearing it, but also people in the hip hop community. I felt like this was a shoe that transcended like a lot of these spaces. But on top of that, these shoes were inexpensive. They were
Yeah.
inexpensive. Um, and so I remember asking my mom, this was in the 7th grade, if she could buy me just classic Chucks. And usually at that time, she would buy one size too big, and I would wear those pairs for the entire year. So she bought me, and I think the high top, low top, the lows were like 29.99, but I think the high tops were like 34.99. And at that point, like my mom could afford those pairs for me, and I wore those Chucks in the 7th grade from August until June, even when like I was like slipping and sliding on the basketball court. But that was like the first shoe that I was like, wow, like I can rock these and look cool. Um, and then a few years later, I had joined cross country. My junior year was my first year joining cross country, and I had a pair of 14.99 uh, shoes, running shoes that I had gotten from Big Five going into my
Shouts to
first year
Big
of cross.
Five. That was my
Shout
first
out to
running shoe
Big
too.
Five. Yes, yeah.
I had some like
Um,
Saucony like I don't know, probably some model or they like spelled the name wrong and then just sent him to Big Five. Like one of the shoes was lower than the other. I was like, it's fine.
Right. That's how you get discounts, like from Ross or Big Five. Like the shoes were just like slightly off. Like there's something about the shoes, like or like if you go to Ross, you can find some like nice Nikes or even Hokas, but they would be like a size 13 men's or
Mm.
something like that. Like even to this day, right?
Yeah.
Um, but anyhow, that year I ran in trainers, and our cross country program, we had about like 6 or 7 kids, and our cross country coach didn't have a background in cross country, but he had a background in soccer. And so I was getting my ass kicked. Obviously, this is my first year running cross country. And towards the end of the season, my coach was like, yo, look at some of these other kids on these other teams. Like, their shoes look skinnier. Like, there's something about their shoes. And I'm like, it's almost the end of the year. I'm wearing these trainers. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to buy a new pair of shoes. And it was at that time where I was like, whatever shoes that I'm wearing should not prevent me from getting to where I need to be. And that's the same exact energy that I've kept
Mm.
to a fault, perhaps. But um, that's the philosophy that I've kept. And I know that's kind of almost a devil's advocate in some ways, because I feel like your viewers are like very like just savvy about shoes and can deep dive into shoes. And as mentioned, I'm like literally the exact opposite, right?
Well, I mean, I get that though because like I've been in the sport long enough where I know that many of the top runners across like all of running are oftentimes like the ones who are like it's almost like it's like the unflappable mindset where you're like my shoe could rip in half and like I'm still gonna beat you because I just am. Um,
And that's the approach that I have. That's the
yeah, and
approach
like
that
that
I've always
probably is
had.
that's like probably why you are the runner you are today. You know, I mean, that probably shaped a lot of, you know, whether it was on purpose or not. Like
Hmm.
that mindset with footwear is then going to like translate to race day or various training runs of being like, oh, no, like this, whatever this might be, like this isn't getting in my way.
Hmm.
And like, that's just that.
Absolutely not. Like it shouldn't. So the ultra running community. Hold on, I apologize. I have about 20% on my phone. Um, the ultra running community is very inclusive. You see everyone from all walks of life uh, enter the sport, especially as this sport is evolving. However, there is an inequity gap in regards to your introduction into the sport. And when I talk about an inequity gap, I'm talking about resources. And if I'm talking about resources, what's the first thing you need in order to run? You need a
Legs,
you need legs, yes.
shoes,
And
shoes.
then you need shoes after. That was an alley oop for you. You need a pair of shoes, right? But it's like being a person of color and just my background being raised by a single parent, I couldn't like shoes, like expensive shoes were not a luxury initially, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people entering the sport who do not have the resources, especially in high school. Like maybe you can have a pair of shoes, but it's like there are a lot of kids that don't have like cross country flats or um, fast running shoes for cross country. And that is an inequity gap because coaches recruiting these high school athletes, they're not going to see your shoes, but they're going to see your times. And it's
Yep.
like if there's some badass kid running a 5K in 17 minutes in trainers, the coach is only going to see 17 minutes. They're not going to realize like, oh shoot, this person is this person doesn't have the resources or didn't do it in like a solid pair of shoes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, we were in high school, you know, running cross country in a time like it might have seemed like an expensive barrier to entry then, but like looking at it
Hmm.
now, where, I mean, yeah, like, so like I mean, we both went to high school in California in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
where it's like there's no spikes, like no, spikes aren't legal in cross country. Now you see the start line of the state meet, it's all $250 carbon plated super shoes because like at Woodward Park,
Yeah.
you might as well just wear that, and like that's what is on the start line. I'm like, dude, I could not imagine
Uh-huh.
asking my parents to buy me $250 shoes, one when I'm like 15 years old, and two when my feet are still growing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like
And there are
that's
a
just
lot of
like where the
kids.
game is at now, and that part, it definitely makes me sad about like just like the state of the sport and how
Mm.
it's not as simple as just like going running now. And like,
Yeah, just
yeah.
given the advancement in shoe technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting to follow, just over the course of the years.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
What was your initial impression of a professional runner who got DQ'd not knowing what stack height regulations were or because of stack height? Like what was it? You can be candid. Like what'd you think about like when you first heard about what had happened to me?
Honestly, I mean, my first like thought was, oh shit, he doesn't know, because like
Mm,
the race is streamed live on the internet. Like lots of people watch. I'm like,
yeah,
you can't fake it and like try and get away with it. And like, and if that was the case, you did a terrible job by wearing a stock colorway of the Skyward X. Like I would have tried to
yeah.
hide it a little bit better. So it's like, okay, like damn, I was like, that's a bummer. And then like Dakota was wearing the Nike Zoom Fly 6, which is also not on the World Athletic Approved list. And I'm like, oh man, these two. I was like, so then the next thought that came to mind was, will they run the whole thing? Like even if there's a high likelihood that they get DQ'd, has like, are they going to
Hmm.
get notified on course? Like I just had questions of like, is someone going to yell at them, be like, hey, or that was another question. What if you changed your shoes like 20 miles in, or was it
Yeah.
you were DQ'd on the first step because that's just the rule? I forget what Skylar listed off in our previous episode, but um, then it was just like the cascade of thoughts were like, damn, like Raj is he's taken the fall for like the rest of the future of ultra running,
Hmm.
and he has to do it during a 100-mile American record attempt,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
at the moment, like at the time when I had like become aware of it, like maybe you were like 30 or 40 miles in, I was like, shit, he's
Hmm.
like at that time I was like, he's gonna break the American record, like, and it's not gonna count, like, damn, like, but
Yeah.
I mean, I coach as well, so then I always try and find like learn, like oftentimes it's like the bad races or the ones with hardship where you take the most learnings from it. So like, you know,
Hmm.
you had said in one of your Instagram posts, you wrote on the shoes like best training run of my life, and
I
like,
had to
yeah,
reframe it for sure.
yeah, absolutely, and that's important because it's like one, you still, I mean, you broke 12 hours for 100 miles, like that's pretty damn cool. I mean, I think you're the
Hmm.
fastest American not named Zach Bitter over
Hmm.
100 miles. I mean, it's unfathomably fast. And, you know, I mean, I'm sure I could go back and forth all day with people of like, was this Skyward X actually an advantage or not? Like, I don't think it would. What I think really matters on that, because it's like rules are rules. But,
Yeah.
um, you know, there's definitely, I mean, I read comments, I don't know where it was, but people were like, oh, yeah, the Skyward X, like that would totally give you a big advantage. And other people were like, well, it weighs so much more than the Rocket X. Like, no, it wouldn't. It's like, well, again, with our sport and ultra running, it's like no one's really tested this before. You know, all of the race shoes, even the Rocket X2, like
Hmm.
that was designed around the distance of a marathon. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't designed around 6:45 pace for 100 miles. So it's like, is that even the best shoe for 100 miles? Is the Skyward X, is one pair of shoes over the course of the race? Like, is that the best answer? Like, we, like, no one actually knows the answers to those questions yet, because all of those little intricacies have not been tested.
Yeah. So what I will say is one advantage that I did get from wearing the Skyward X's uh, was recovery. Like
That makes
2 days
sense.
late, I went from I thought I was gonna be limping for like half a week at least, and 2 days later I was walking just fine. And I considered I apologize. This entire time I had my cat here. Let me put her down. She's been
Dude,
nibbling
Raj
on
is a
my
part of Cat
I
Nation.
I here like can I
Hell yeah.
introduce one of my cats? This is here. Hi sweetie. This is sorry, I have two black cats. They're a bonded pair, so sometimes it's hard to tell
Oops.
who's who. But this is pre Panu, so this is pre-Fontaine Panu. Um, and then the other one is Paneer Panu. She's chilling. Um, but no, I apologize. She
So you
kind
have
of threw
two
me
black
off.
cats named Pre and Paneer.
I have two black kittens named Pre and Paneer Panu. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I'm a single cat dad, just trying to make ends meet.
Respect. Two cats. Two cats is no joke. I've got one cat, and that's enough.
I I I always wanted a cat, but given how busy I am with teaching and running, like I felt like I would do a disservice to just having one house cat. And I told myself after Javelina that if I were to get a cat, I'd get two cats that can just like entertain themselves for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like where my cat and my kid are right now. They're like best friends, and they kind of pretty much operate on the same wavelength. And my cat's fortunately very patient because he's like
Uh-huh.
getting clumps of fur ripped out of him all the time, but no claws have come out yet, so that's been good. But
Your kid is 9 months, right? So and then how
yeah,
old is your cat?
10 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
A
Wow.
bit of an age gap, but
Yeah.
like he just passed him for size. I mean, he's like my cat is 15 pounds,
Oh
pretty
wow.
pretty big. So like he can hold his own against a 9 month old, like no problem.
Is it like a Maine Coon cat?
He's part
Part.
part
Okay.
Maine
Yeah.
Coon, yeah.
15's pretty damn heavy. You should take that cat out for a walk at least, just to.
Oh, it's all muscle.
It's all muscle.
No, it's like 12 pounds of fur.
I, once one of them reached 5 pounds, I just like jokingly started doing dumbbell curls with them. Like when I was
Oh
training,
yeah,
running a 100-mile race, and I would grab them and do like a hip hinge exercise and like play with them at the same time simultaneously.
that's some ultra runner weightlifting right there. 5 pound
That,
dumbbells.
yeah, 5 pounds, right? I apologize. I know we're shooting this shit. Um, you wanted me to talk about the Skyward X and the recovery of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I got thrown off. Took me a couple days. Took me a couple days after my race where I could walk just fine, and then went out for a shakeout run a week after, and then I went out for an 8 mile run just today. And actually, I wore prior to our podcast, I wore the Skyward X's just to get a better idea as to like, okay, you ran 100 miles in them. Did it feel like it gave you like an actual performance advantage? Once like a mile in, I'm like, man, these shoes are pretty damn heavy. Like, there's no advantage over a Rocket X2, but there's definitely. I feel like if you want to stack miles, like the Skyward X is a really solid shoe because you can just recover really quickly.
Mhm. Yep,
So
and that's where the super trainer category of shoes is coming in, where it's like just make it just so fat, but still have like pretty nice foams for that recovery aspect. So, um, is that a shoe that you're gonna like weave into your weekly training now?
it's weird. I've had such a weird relationship with the Skyward X, and I've told you, your viewers, like my initial impression was that I was never gonna run in it to a point where I decided to run in them like very last minute. And I run 100 miles and then I get disqualified. And then there's all this like, I now have a very complicated relationship with the Skyward X, and it's not necessarily bad by any means, right? Like it is a very perplexing at the moment, but I think it's kind of cool in some ways. Like like just the series of events that led me to run in the Skyward X's, but also like coming out of it like feeling good and like being
Yeah.
healthy and not dealing off record. We were talking about our own separate like knee issues that we've had, right? Like I felt like I've recovered just fine and I'm ready for like the next race or the next training cycle.
Yeah. Do I know you had I think maybe it was in the it was either on one of your Instagram posts or in that Runner's World article about, what the rest of your year, the next 12
Hmm.
months looks like and whether this jackpot result adjusts things cuz it sounded like you were getting like a little more like trail curious, but maybe less
Yeah.
so now. Like what's your
No, no, no.
what's your
So
year looking like?
when they had interviewed me, like I was super stressed out. Like I didn't really care about my next race. Like was just I was under the spotlight not for the best reason, and it's like I had
Mhm.
to convey to people in the most authentic manner as to like not only like why I decided on the Skyward X, but also my relationship with shoes and this and that. Like I was at that time like not really focused on what was next, rather just taking care of what I needed to take care of. However, with that being said, I'm registered for Canyon's 50K. My initial plan, even prior to Jackpot, was do Jackpot 100 and then do a Canyons race after.
Okay.
And I would have loved to run Black Canyon. I registered last year. However, just my rigid job in education, which is not remote during the winter times, like it's hard for me to go out for a trail run during the winter months in Denver, and to
Totally.
get
Yeah.
to get volume, to get elevation. So that's why I've been doing Jackpot versus Black Canyon. However, um, I write articles or I write like training logs, like leading up to races and whatnot. Initially, I told myself that this was going to be the last time I was going to race a road 100 in quite some time. Um, and I wanted to transition into trail running just to show that I'm very like um, that like I have range. Like I can do
Yeah.
roads, trails, like whatever it is. And I really do believe that that's the next step in the evolution of my running career for sure. Like I want to be able to run a really fast road and then like kick ass on the trails as well.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So will we see you at Jackpot next year?
I have no choice. I have it's weird because I don't want, and as you've told me, like a lot of people will like in the chats, like, like get fixated about certain things and shoes and whatnot.
Mhm.
There's a part of me that doesn't want to do it because I don't want to take the spotlight, be it bad or good, away from the other runners. Because like if I am doing Jackpot 100, I feel like naturally the topic of conversation would be like, let's do a shoe check on him. Like, let's see he's like abiding to USATF regulations. However, there's also a part of me that's like, well, shit, I gotta like do this again just to prove a damn point. So I'm leaning towards the latter at the moment. I will definitely do Jackpot, or I will definitely do Jackpot again. Not sure if I'll do it next year.
Yeah.
Um, but can I share a really quick Dakota Jones story? And I have 10% battery life.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
just because I thought it was like the funniest thing ever. So as you know, and everyone else, Dakota was also chasing the American record, right? And when you're chasing a record like that for the 100 miles, you have to be, at least running wise, like really dialed in and really like on it for all 11 hours and under 19 minutes or so. And I kid you not, 30 miles in, Dakota and I had this initial agreement that we will trade off because it was incredibly windy out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one point where it wasn't a runner, but it was just somebody at the park. They were on the outside of uh, of the uh, of the loop that we were running, and this person flat out just ate shit. they ate shit and fell in the most hilarious manner. Now, I didn't bat an eye. I'm like, I'm running 646 pace. But Dakota stopped what he was doing and he went towards that person and asked them if they were okay. And then he hopped back on. And I asked him, and him and I barely talked because we wanted to run as hard as possible. And I'm like, dude, did you just do that? And he's like, yeah, man, like she had she just fell. Like I felt like obligated to help her. And I felt like such an asshole because one, I thought it was funny, but I turned the cheek and I'm like, I didn't see that. I'm trying to save that other person from embarrassment, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. Dakota. What a freaking saint.
Yeah, no, he's an amazing guy. And I will say this, like, if the shoe was on the other foot, no pun intended, like if this had happened to him, I would have gone to bat for that dude. I'm like, guys, this is freaking ridiculous. Whatever. I mean, look, I understand the rules are the rules, but like, if he was called out for something like that, and like, I, w- I, w- I would have lost my mind for him. But he's a really cool guy.
That's an awesome story. That's actually one of the best stories from a race I've heard that like also shows just like the true character of a human and like full stop. Like I would have definitely played the I did not see that fall card
Yeah,
as
like
well.
majority of us, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
guess yeah. Dakota's shouts to Dakota. um,
absolutely, absolutely.
Man, Raj. Well, thank you so much for hopping on this the school night in the evening,
Hmm.
and chatting shoes and life and all sorts of things with me. This has been such a fun conversation.
This has been awesome. This was not like interview style. You didn't ask me questions priorhand. Like we had an idea as to how we were going to go forward with it, but I reached out and I'm like, let's shoot the shit. There's one person that knows a lot about shoes. There's one person who just had a carefree approach, and we met in the middle. And one my closing thoughts about everything is just I really do want to thank everyone who's been super supportive. Most of the people have been very empathetic, and they were like, "Man, I feel for Raj. It's very unfortunate, and I do acknowledge rules are rules, and this is something that I decided I have to move forward. But I cannot thank the ultra running community enough, along with Hoka for just being like, yo, super unfortunate, but we support you. So I do want to thank both Hoka and the people in the community. And also thank you to you, dude. I reached out to you. I initially did not want to be on a podcast or anything, but I thought this was a really cool like thing that we can do.
well, I appreciate that. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, next time maybe we'll overlap in the bay at some point. We'll go for a run.
Absolutely. You're a dad, you're a cat dad. You have several jobs. You reach out to me, okay? It sounds like you're a little bit more busy than I am.
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Cheers, brother. Take care of yourself.